The galaxy didn't declare war. It issued a deadline, not through fleets, not through ambassadors, not even through the familiar cold language of diplomacy. It arrived everywhere at once, clean, precise, impossible to trace. A signal that bypassed encryption, ignored distance, and slipped through every known layer of human technology, as if those defenses had never existed at all. On Earth, it cut through morning broadcasts and late-night silence alike. It appeared in the middle of children's cartoons, in the quiet hum of hospital monitors, in the static between deep space transmissions. Screens didn't glitch, they obeyed. Every device, from orbital arrays to outdated handhelds, synchronized into a single moment of forced attention. Then came the message. No voice, no face, no origin, just words. Earth will comply or Earth will be erased. There was no distortion, no emotional inflection. The statement carried no anger, no urgency, no hatred. It was delivered with the same tone one might use to state a law of physics. Something inevitable, something already decided, and beneath it, more terrifying than the threat itself. A countdown began. Numbers, descending with perfect rhythm. Across every time zone, every continent, every satellite feed, the same sequence ticked downward in flawless synchronization. Governments tried to shut it down, cut power grids, isolate networks, sever global communication lines, but the signal didn't care. It wasn't in the systems. It was above them. In orbit, human defense stations attempted to trace its origin. They found nothing. No direction. No signal decay. It didn't come from a ship or a fleet or even a known region of space. It simply existed, everywhere at once, like a thought forced into reality. Panic should have followed, but it didn't, not immediately. There was confusion first. Analysts scrambling for context. Military leaders demanding confirmation. Scientists arguing over impossible data that refused to behave logically. Was it a bluff? A psychological operation? Some unknown species projecting power through fear alone? But then the second wave of realization hit. This wasn't a negotiation. There were no demands beyond compliance. No terms. No conditions. No indication of what surrender even meant. Just a binary outcome, presented with chilling certainty. Obey or cease to exist. And for the first time in centuries of expansion, exploration, and defiance, humanity found itself facing something it couldn't argue with, couldn't threaten, couldn't even identify. Across Earth, people began to feel it. Not fear. Not yet. Something heavier. Like standing at the edge of an ocean at night, knowing something vast is out there in the dark, and realizing it already knows you're watching. Deep within command centers buried beneath mountains and oceans, leaders gathered in silence, eyes locked on the descending numbers. Every instinct, every doctrine, every fragment of human history screamed the same response. Answer the threat. Speak. Negotiate. Fight. Do something. But no response was sent. No signal returned. No message acknowledged. As the countdown continued its relentless descent, something unexpected began to take shape. Not in the skies, not in the stars, but in the collective stillness of an entire species. Humanity chose silence, and in that silence, something far more dangerous than fear began to grow. Earth had not become stronger in the way the galaxy expected. There were no towering orbital cannons visible from space. No armadas patrolling its borders with aggressive intent. No displays of power meant to intimidate distant civilizations watching from the dark. From orbit, the planet still looked human. Blue oceans breathing against green continents. Cities glowing softly like constellations mapped onto the surface of a living world. But that illusion ended the moment you looked closer, because beneath that calm surface, Earth had been rewritten. Layer by layer, decade by decade, humanity had built something deeper than defense, something woven into the planet itself. Subterranean vaults stretched across tectonic plates, carved into the bones of the world. Oceans had silent structures miles below crushing pressure, where machines pulsed with quiet purpose, unseen and unannounced. Satellites still orbited above, but they were no longer the ones doing the real work. The real systems didn't orbit. They listened. Admiral Kale Rin stood at the center of it all, far below the surface, deeper than any bunker designed for war, deeper than any structure meant to survive extinction. He watched the galaxy unfold across a wall of living light. The command vault wasn't a room. It was an interface, a circular chamber of shifting holographic layers, each one representing a different dimension of reality. Physical space, signal interference, gravitational anomalies, unknown variables that had no official classification. Everything was moving. Fleet signatures bloomed along the outer edges of human territory. Each one tagged, analyzed, predicted. Thousands of ships, then tens of thousands, then more, until the display stopped counting and simply labeled them as a unified presence. The galaxy had done something it had never done before. It had agreed. Species that had warred for millennia now moved in perfect coordination. Their formations were not chaotic, not emotional. They were precise, engineered by collective fear. Each fleet positioned with mathematical intent, forming a tightening perimeter around the solar system like a noose that hadn't been pulled yet but would be. They're synchronizing targeting grids. A voice said from somewhere beyond the light. Calm, controlled, try not to sound afraid. Another layer shifted into view. Predictive models, branching futures rendered in cascading probabilities. Most of them ended the same way. Silence. Extinction. Kale didn't react. He had seen these projections before, lived with them, memorized the shapes of failure until they no longer felt hypothetical. His eyes remained fixed on the outer boundary, where the first wave had already crossed into human space. No hesitation, no attempt at communication. They had accepted the premise of the message. Earth would comply, or Earth would be erased. Behind him, the command vault pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat, not mechanical, not entirely. The systems here didn't just process data. They adapted, learned, responded to patterns no human mind could fully grasp anymore. Humanity had built them to survive uncertainty, and now uncertainty had arrived in its purest form. They think we're outmatched, another voice whispered. Kale allowed himself a single breath. They're right, he said quietly. Not defeat, just fact, because this was never going to be a battle of fleets. The galaxy had come prepared for war, for resistance, retaliation, desperation. They had not come prepared for what Earth had been building in silence. Kale stepped forward, the holographic light bending around him as if the system itself recognized authority not just in rank, but in understanding. Status, he asked. A pause. Then the answer came, not from a person, but from the system itself. Observation, threshold approaching. Kale's gaze didn't shift. Good, he murmured. Outside, the fleets continued to gather. Inside, Earth did something far more dangerous than preparing to fight. It waited. The rising tension did not begin with explosions. It began with silence breaking in the wrong places. At first, it was subtle enough that most civilizations dismissed it as system noise. A communication delay here. A misaligned fleet coordination signal there. Minor anomalies across deep space channels that analysts labeled as statistical drift. Nothing unusual for a galaxy stitched together by millions of competing technologies. But then the pattern emerged. Not random, not chaotic, directed, on the outer edges of human space. Scout fleets began reporting something they could not properly categorize. Sensor ghosts. Faint distortions in gravitational mapping that appeared only when ships attempted to lock targeting solutions onto Earth system. The moment observation sharpened, the universe itself seemed to soften, as if refusing to be measured. Inside command vessels, captains ran diagnostics that returned perfect results while their instincts screamed contradiction. Weapon systems reported readiness, yet targeting reticles refused to stabilize on planetary coordinates. Every attempt to finalize engagement parameters ended in a recursive loop, calculation without conclusion, and still the fleets advanced, because retreat was no longer an option. The countdown continued across Earth, visible now not just on human systems, but bleeding into alien networks attempting to intercept it. That descending sequence of numbers became an obsession, a universal heartbeat, ticking towards something no one could name without feeling the weight of it in their chest. On Concorde-class observation ships, crews stopped speaking in full sentences. On Threx command dreadnoughts, war chants lost rhythm, replaced by clipped, uncertain reports. Entire fleets that once moved with absolute certainty now adjusted formation every few seconds, as if reacting to a threat they could not locate but refused to ignore. And still, no response came from Earth. No broadcast. No surrender. No negotiation. Just a steady, unbearable continuation of silence. Deep within the human command vault, Admiral Kale Ren watched the same tension unfold across the holographic war map. But unlike the others, he wasn't searching for the enemy. He was watching the reaction. Because Earth had seen this before. Not in war, but in observation. Years ago, deep space probes had gone missing near the galactic boundary regions. Entire sensor arrays had returned corrupted data, not broken but altered. Signals that should have bounced back intact came back rearranged, as if something had looked at them and decided to edit what they meant. At the time, humanity had called it interference, then coincidence, then danger, and finally, something no one was allowed to speak about outside classified vaults. Attention. Now, as alien fleets closed in from every vector, that same phenomenon intensified. The closer they focused on Earth, the more unstable their own systems became. Not failing, never failing, but refusing to finalize intent. Weapons hesitated milliseconds too long. Tactical AIs generated probability trees that ended in contradiction. Entire strike formations paused mid-execution order, without knowing why. It was as if reality itself was introducing doubt. A junior analyst in Kale's command center finally whispered what everyone was thinking, but no one dared confirm. It's like, the closer they look at us, she said, voice tight, the less certain the universe becomes about letting them act. Kale didn't answer immediately. He already knew. The galaxy was not just preparing for war anymore. It was struggling to decide if war was still allowed to happen. And somewhere beyond all fleets, beyond all sensors, beyond even the concept of distance, something was watching the watchers back. The truth did not arrive like a revelation. It arrived like a failure of reality to stay consistent. It began aboard a Threx command carrier at the edge of the human system. A tactical officer noticed something impossible. Every long-range sensor feed aimed toward Earth had begun to return slightly different versions of the same data. Not corrupted, not degraded, rewritten. Star positions shifted by fractions of degrees that contradicted all known orbital mechanics. Signal reflections arrived back with timing errors that implied causality was bending rather than breaking. At first, the crew assumed a hostile countermeasure, a human stealth field, a hidden weapon designed to distort perception. So they intensified observation. That was a mistake. The more they focused, the less stable the data became. Across multiple fleets simultaneously, the same phenomenon appeared. Sensor arrays attempting to resolve Earth's position began producing overlapping contradictions, like reality was offering multiple answers to a single question and refusing to confirm which one was correct. And then came the first true fracture. A Veil Consortium deep scan vessel recorded Earth system and returned a reading of two incompatible histories existing at once. One where humanity never advanced beyond early spaceflight. Another where Earth had already colonized half the galaxy. Both readings were equally strong. Both collapsed the moment analysts tried to isolate either as false. Inside command centers, panic did not immediately follow. Confusion did, because the data did not indicate deception. It indicated instability in observation itself. Admiral Kaelrin saw it first in the human system overlays. A flicker at the edge of the holographic map. Not an enemy fleet, not a new threat vector, a missing certainty. Every alien fleet converging on Earth began reporting subtle anomalies in their own internal systems. Time-stamped logs no longer agreed across vessels. Weapons calibration records showed identical inputs, producing different outputs depending on who reviewed them. Tactical AI models began generating outcomes that contradicted previously established physics constraints. And yet, nothing external was attacking them. Nothing was interfering, except attention. Deep within classified human archives, files sealed not for secrecy, but for containment, there existed references to something no one in the scientific community was allowed to treat as real. Early deep space observation, anomalies, probes that returned with altered logs, starfield recordings that changed when re-examined, experiments where measurement itself produced divergence in outcome. They called it noise, then error, then artifact. But eventually, they stopped naming it altogether, because naming it made it feel real. Now, as entire galactic fleets locked their attention on Earth, that same phenomenon returned, but amplified beyond anything recorded in human history. Observation was no longer passive. It was interactive. The act of focusing on Earth was changing what Earth could be defined as. Inside a Threx flagship, the warlord finally ordered full-spectrum analysis suppression. Reduce observation fidelity. It commanded, stabilize the target profile. But the systems hesitated. Not malfunctioned. Hesitated. As if the universe itself was waiting for permission to be seen clearly. On a veiled vessel, a scientist whispered something that was not included in official reports. "It's not hiding from us," she said. "It's responding to us looking." That sentence spread faster than any transmission order, because it reframed everything. Earth was not being targeted by a galaxy preparing for war. Earth was being defined by it, and the more aggressively the galaxy tried to define it, the less stable the definition became. In the human command vault, Admiral Kale finally spoke, voice low beneath the shifting light of impossible data. "They're not observing Earth," he said. "They're collapsing it into one version of reality." A pause, then the realization, settling like gravity in every mind present. And something is refusing to let that happen. The galaxy did not realize it had already lost the moment it chose to act. The first strike was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was coordination. Every fleet, every war mind, every empire-bound targeting system finally committing to a single unified conclusion. Millions of ships across light years aligned their firing solutions in perfect, terrifying harmony. Energy harvesters surged. Dimensional capacitors opened like wounds in space. Entire starships began to hum with the accumulated intent of extinction. And then, at the exact same moment, they fired. The void lit up like a dying god. Beams of collapsed fusion, gravitational spears, antimatter cascades, and quantum rupture pulses tore through space toward Earth's position in a storm so dense it bent perception itself. For a fraction of a second, the human system ceased to be visible under the weight of overwhelming destruction. Every sensor across the Armada registered the same result. Impact confirmed. Somewhere in the Threx flagship, the warlord exhaled slowly, mandibles easing. Across veiled command vessels, relief protocols activated. Even the most cautious species allowed themselves a calculated moment of certainty. Earth had been erased. But Admiral Kale Ren did not move, because the numbers on his display had not changed. No debris signatures. No energy dissipation curves. No planetary fragmentation data. No gravitational collapse. Just silence. Then the silence shifted. Not broken. Not interrupted. Rewritten. Across the entire battlefield network. Every fleet began receiving a second layer of sensor feedback, an overlay that did not match any known physical model. The attack had not been blocked. It had not been deflected. It had simply failed to resolve into a final state. Energy beams that should converge on Earth instead dispersed into trajectories that never intersected. Gravity weapons lost coherence mid-flight, their vectors dissolving into meaningless curvature. Antimatter charges annihilated themselves before reaching deterministic completion. It was as if every act of destruction had been denied the permission to become real. Inside the Threx flagship, alarms finally triggered, but not for impact failure, for causality mismatch. The target is intact, a voice reported, breaking for the first time in recorded Threx military history. "That's impossible," the warlord snapped. "We fired directly into orbit." "We are aware," came the reply, but the outcome did not register as valid interaction. Across veil networks, panic escalated not from loss, but from interpretation failure. Their systems could not classify what had just occurred. No category existed for a strike that reached its destination physically, but not existentially. And then it happened. Every targeting system, every observation feed, every war mind linked to the assault simultaneously registered the same anomaly. Earth was still there, not rebuilt, not repaired, not protected, just unchanged. as if the galaxy had attempted to write a sentence into reality, and reality had refused to acknowledge it. In the human command vault, the holographic display stabilized into a single persistent image, fleets frozen in mid-analysis, weapon systems cycling through unresolved states, commanders unable to reconcile action with consequence. Kale finally spoke. "They didn't miss," he said quietly. No one responded. He stepped closer to the projection, eyes reflecting a battlefield that could not accept its own outcome. "They were allowed to try," he continued. "That's the difference." Outside the solar system, something vast and unseen adjusted its attention again. Not aggressively, not defensively, but with the calm finality of a system correcting an error. And for the first time since the countdown began, the galaxy understood what it meant to be denied. The silence that followed was not peace. It was verification. Across the shattered coordination networks of the galaxy, fleets that had moments ago been unified in annihilation now drifted in stunned, broken formation. Weapons still glowed with residual charge. Targeting grids still marked Earth as engaged. But every system, no matter how advanced, now returned the same impossible conclusion. No valid outcome exists. In the aftermath of the failed assault, space itself seemed hesitant, not empty, never empty, but uncertain in a way that defied physics. Ships that tried to reestablish firing solutions found their computations looping endlessly, as if reality refused to finalize any scenario involving Earth's destruction. And then the withdrawals began. Not retreat in panic, but disengagement born from incomprehension. Entire fleets powered down weapon arrays without command. Tactical AIs, unable to resolve contradiction. Enter containment logic states. Some civilizations attempted to reboot their systems. Others attempted to reframe their models of physics itself. All of them reached the same breaking point. The universe would not confirm Earth's erasure. In the Threx flagship, the warlord stood motionless, staring at a battlefield map that no longer obeyed cause and effect. His voice, when it finally came, was lower than any command he had ever issued. "Report status," he demanded. There was a pause, a long one. Then the answer arrived, not from subordinates, but from the ship itself, filtered through layers of fractured interpretation. Engagement outcome, unresolved. That word, unresolved, spread across fleets faster than panic ever could, because war had always been simple in principle. Apply force, observe result. But now, observation itself had failed to produce truth. The galaxy had struck Earth, and reality had refused to render judgment. In human space, Admiral Kael'ren watched the collapse of the assault with an expression that was not relief. It was recognition. On the central holographic display, fleets flickered like dying constellations of intent. Every hostile system attempting recalibration was met with the same subtle resistance, not active defense, not retaliation, but something quieter, a boundary, not physical, not technological, conceptual. "You see it now," Kale said softly, though no one needed to hear him to understand. Around him, analysts remained frozen, caught between awe and disbelief as incoming data streams began to stabilize into a single coherent pattern. The galaxy had not been defeated in battle. It had been denied the authority to conclude one. Far beyond the solar system, where fleets once stood as unified instruments of extinction, something began to shift in perception. Commanders reported an unsettling sensation, the feeling that Earth was no longer simply a target within space. It was something space had to negotiate with. The idea spread slowly, like a disease of understanding. And once it took hold, it changed everything. Because if Earth could not be erased, not by force, not by unity, not by the combined will of countless civilizations, then the implication was no longer military. It was existential. Humanity had not built a stronger army. They had not outmatched the galaxy in firepower. They had simply reached something deeper than warfare itself, a place where actions no longer guaranteed outcomes, unless reality agreed to allow them. Back on Earth, nothing appeared different. Skies remained blue. Oceans continued their endless rhythm. Cities pulsed with life, unaware of the war that had just failed to happen in full. But in orbit, every surviving fleet now shared a single, silent realization. Earth was not protected. It was untouchable in principle. And somewhere beyond the edge of understanding, something vast continued to watch, not as a weapon, not as a god, but as the final authority on whether the galaxy was even allowed to try again